All right, so let's talk about exercise. So what do we know about the benefits and the effectiveness of exercise and rehabilitation and physical therapy for people with Parkinson's disease? So a little bit about where we've been and where we're going. This slide just talks about sort of, if you look back, before 1980, there were actually no what we call randomized controlled trials or more rigorous studies looking at the benefits of exercise for people with Parkinson's disease. That's not that long ago, actually. And since that time, there has been such a steep incline in the interest and in the interest in exercise as a standard treatment for people with Parkinson's disease. And this graph only goes up to 2007 or so, and I would say in the last 10 years that line is even steeper. We've had many larger exercise trials in Parkinson's disease showing the importance and the benefits of exercise. And I'm going to share with you some of that research. So how does exercise work? What is actually happening? Why is exercise so important? Well, exercise is important for everybody, right? Whether you have Parkinson's disease or not, there's a lot of benefits of exercise. But in Parkinson's, there's been some work done in animal models. So in mice and even monkeys where Parkinson's disease is induced. And in this graph here, in these figures here, you can see that there's a variety of ways in animal models in which exercise seems to have benefits. There seems to be more dopamine released when animals are exercising, right? And when there's more dopamine released, you can have better movement, right? Better function. And then there's also an important chemical in the brain. These are called GDNF or BDNF. These are neurotrophic factors. These are chemicals that are thought to protect vulnerable cells from dying. So the vulnerable cells in the midbrain that produce dopamine. These have been shown to be more viable or to live longer or to be sustained better under conditions in which the animals are exercising. So what Dr. Bledsoe was saying earlier, we don't have any definitive what we call neuroprotective or modulatory effects on the disease. Exercise is one of these things where in animal models we have some inkling that this may be the case, but in humans we don't have a good way to measure it. Even for drug studies, we don't have a good way of measuring it. We don't have sophisticated enough tests that actually can see if the number of cells in this particular area of the brain are being preserved. And so, although we don't know in humans with Parkinson's disease if exercise actually slows down the progression of the disease, what I'm going to share with you is all of the data we have at the behavioral level. And so what that means is that we have lots and lots of studies showing that we can reduce disability or maintain higher levels of function with exercise. So when people with Parkinson's disease exercise, they do better over the long term compared to people who don't. So we hope these changes in the brain are happening. But again, we don't have the tools to really examine that in the human brain. The good news is, though, about exercise, unlike drugs, when you have a drug that you think might be effective and you want to test the drug, or it has to go through lots and lots and lots of testing and eventually get FDA approval. Well, exercise doesn't need FDA approval, right? It's freely available. We don't have to know all the answers about exercise. We have enough information about exercise to know this should be part of the standard treatment of Parkinson's disease. So what does this look like for you? Is this the sort of analogous treatment to the animal models? Well, hopefully we can do a little bit better than that. So there's some data suggesting that exercise has, improves overall brain health. And this is the case for everybody, right? We know that when you exercise, particularly cardiovascular exercise or aerobic exercise, there's more blood flow to the brain. And when there's more blood flow to the brain, it brings important chemicals to the brain, these neuroprotective factors that we talked about. So that is a really important piece of the puzzle there. And then there's some evidence in humans that there's actually some structural changes that happen in the brain with exercises that enhance the communication of the neurons so that they can talk better. So communicate better with each other. There's changes in the receptor level, there's increased number of synapses, and overall we think that this leads to sort of more efficient firing of the circuits and better behavior, a better motor output. Okay, so now the big question everybody asks me is, well, what is the best exercise? Just tell me exactly what I have to do. What does it involve? Is it the bike? Do I have to go on the treadmill? Do I need to be in the pool? Do I have to lift weights? What do I have to do? Just lay it out there. And so it's not that simple. So I'm going to get right to it and tell you what the best forms of exercise are. A whole bunch of things, right? And it depends on the particular challenges that you face. Everybody here knows how different Parkinson's is from one person to another, right? And so depending on your particular profile or the challenges you face, there are certain exercises that may be better for you than others, right? In general, though, the studies that have been done in Parkinson's show benefits of all of these things. Cardiovascular or aerobic exercise, right? What does that mean? That could mean walking on a treadmill, that could mean walking just outside, that could mean biking, some forms of boxing will give an aerobic benefit. And then there's things like, and I'm going to talk more about this, strength training. So using weights or providing resistance to the muscles to get stronger. That seems to be important in overcoming some of the slowness or the bradykinesia that people with Parkinson's disease experience. And there's also data showing the benefits of balance training in the form of balance exercise or Tai Chi or dance, which we'll talk about. And then stretching can be important to reduce rigidity or improve flexibility. And then there's something I'm going to call task-specific training or practice of the actual function that you're trying to improve, like walking or standing up from a chair or getting in and out of bed, for example. Okay, so let's go through each one of these, and I'm going to give you some more specifics. So what about aerobic exercise or cardiovascular exercise? The good news is there's not one form of cardiovascular exercise that's been shown to be better than another for people with Parkinson's disease. So you want to choose what you like, right? It's so important to choose something that you're going to stick to, something that you're going to make part of your everyday life. That is what the important thing is. So there's some options here. There is actually lots of data showing the benefits of treadmill training, of walking on a treadmill for people with Parkinson's disease. And that's because of many things. How many of you have experienced walking and then over time the walking tends to get slower? A little bit more of a shuffling pattern. It seems like you start out okay, right? And over time you get a little bit slower, a little bit slower. Has anyone experienced that here? Yes, right? And so what does the treadmill do? Well, the treadmill has a belt that's moving underneath you, right? That you set at a consistent velocity, right? And so if you're walking on the treadmill, you actually can't slow down, right? Unless you fall off the back, right? And so the treadmill is sort of a pacer. It helps you keep that regular, consistent, faster pace, right? So that can be really good for some people. For people who freeze, for example, the treadmill is not a very good choice. It can be very difficult to walk on a treadmill. So things like the bike might be a better solution, where people who freeze when they walk don't have any trouble with the biking. And the biking can be a good way to get a cardiovascular workout by manipulating either the resistance or the number of revolutions per minute. Okay? All right, we good there? So this is just some data showing that people with Parkinson's who walk on the treadmill, this down here just means that people with Parkinson's who walk on the treadmill have faster gait speed compared to people who are not exercising. Okay? So this is a summary, a review, a systematic review showing the results of many studies combined. In this particular study here, this was a study done looking at walking outside. So this was people with Parkinson's disease walking 45 minutes 3 times a week with a heart rate monitor on, and they walked for 6 months. Now, there was no control group here, so this is just one group of people. But here what we saw is that there were improvements in almost every variable here. There was improvement in efficient use of oxygen, so better fitness. There was improvements in walking speed, improvements in the Parkinson's symptoms. When you go to the doctor and the doctor does these kind of tests here, those were improved. And there was even improvement in thinking, in cognition, and improvement in fatigue. Right? So this needs to be reproduced in a larger study with a control group, but this is very encouraging. And there's a study, one thing that people often ask is, how hard do you have to work? How intense does the exercise need to be for people with Parkinson's disease to have the best effect? So we don't have the definitive answer to that. There's a large study that's going on right now, and the paper is actually under review, so we're going to find out pretty soon. But this was a study in which over a year, but the primary endpoint here was at 6 months. So people with Parkinson's disease exercised 4 days a week on a treadmill. And some people exercised at a moderate intensity, at 60 to 65% heart rate max, and some people exercised at 80 to 85%. And so at the end of 6 months, we're going to be able to answer the question about whether a higher intensity or a moderate intensity exercise is better, or whether they're both the same. Right now, I can tell you with the data that we have so far, that you want to be exercising at least a moderate intensity. So what does that mean? That means when you're walking on a treadmill or on the stationary bike, you've got to be sweating. You've got to be a little out of breath. It has to be a little bit beyond your current capabilities. You have to push yourself a little bit beyond what feels very comfortable, okay? So everybody's level of intensity is different. So it's not like there's a high intensity that everybody has to get to, or a medium, moderate intensity that everybody has to get to. It's individualized, depending on where your starting point is. So everybody here in this room can participate in exercise. It's a matter of figuring out where you're starting from and what's the next appropriate level for you to be challenging. Right? Because what's intense for you is going to be different than the intensity that somebody else needs. Okay? Okay, so what about strength training? Okay, so everybody's familiar with either weights that you can use or bands or some sort of machines, but there have been studies done in this area over a 2-year period. There was a study done in which people with Parkinson's disease actually went to a gym and lifted weights for 2 years. And there were 2 groups of people. People with Parkinson's who lifted the weights, and they were increased gradually over that 2-year period. And then there was a group of people who lifted the weights, and they stayed the same the whole 2-year period. And the results here show a significant difference in favor of the people who had the progressive resistance exercise. So this is really an important point. The exercise, you can't do one exercise program for life at the same rate, right? Exercise has to be progressed, right? It has to be gradually a bit more and more challenging over time. It has to be at that just right point for each individual in order to optimize the benefit. It's just like medication, You can't have one set of medicines that are going to be perfect for Parkinson's disease over the course of the disease. That doesn't work. The medicines have to be adjusted periodically. So does the exercise program. That's very important. Okay, and then everybody wants to know, well, what do you strengthen? What are the target muscle groups? And in Parkinson's disease, it turns out that it's the extensor muscles. It's the muscles in the legs, the buttocks, the front of the legs here, the back of the legs, the calf, and the back here. These are the most important muscles to target in Parkinson's disease. These are the muscles that have sort of less activation, less sort of drive from the brain, the muscles that need the most help in turning on faster and recruiting more muscle fibers. And so here's a picture here. All of you have, I think, have the American Parkinson's Disease Association exercise booklet right there on your tables, right? So we wrote that booklet, and these are pictures from there. Okay, so the good thing about the strengthening exercises is that you don't have to have fancy equipment for this to work. You don't have to have any equipment. In fact, you can do this right at home. And the way that we make it more and more challenging is to use body weight, right? To use body weight in different ways to make the exercise more and more challenging over time. So in this particular book, you'll see pictures of level 1, level 2, level 3 sort of exercises. So you can figure out, all right, I'm going to start at the beginning and then work my way up over time. Okay. So then what about stretching and flexibility exercises? These are particularly important for people who have stiffness or a lot of rigidity. People who complain about pain in the hip or the shoulder or the back tend to benefit most from a flexibility program. So there are certain muscles that need to be targeted the most for people with Parkinson's disease. There are particular muscles in the back here, in the hamstrings, what we call the hip flexors in the front. These are muscles that allow people to stand up straighter, take bigger steps, and they can get tight and stiff over time. And some of these muscles some of this tightness can contribute to pain, particularly pain in the shoulder and the hip. And these things are modifiable. We have evidence to show that we can actually increase muscle length in people with Parkinson's disease, and that we can reduce pain with an adequate stretching program. Okay, and then what about balance? So many people here may have experienced a fall, or maybe several falls, or maybe fear of falling, or maybe stumbled and almost falling. So this is an area that I would say everybody with Parkinson's disease needs to be sort of aware of, and this should be part of an exercise program. So you can see here, this was a study looking at the benefits of Tai Chi. This was actually published in the New England Journal of Medicine a few years ago. And in this study, what they found is that Tai Chi, this was over a 6-month period. So people with Parkinson's participated in a Tai Chi class twice a week for 6 months. And at the end of that 6-month period, the people who participated in Tai Chi had better balance, okay, than people who participated in strengthening and people who participated in a stretching program. So in terms of falls, though, both the Tai Chi and the resistance, or the strength training group, saw a reduction in falls. So we know from this study and from many others that both Tai Chi, or balance training, and strengthening or resistance training are both important and both effective for reducing fall rates in people with Parkinson's disease. That makes sense, right? Because when you catch your balance, or when you have a balance reaction, you actually have to turn on your muscles fast enough and with enough force to make an effective balance reaction, right? So working on balance and controlling your balance and working on turning those muscles on fast enough and with enough force are both important to reduce fall rate. And there's also been lots of studies done looking at the benefits of dance. Okay, there's a group at WashU, Gammon Earhart. They've done quite a few rigorous studies looking at particularly at tango. So they had people with Parkinson's disease actually participate in 2 classes a week of tango for a year. And this was a very rigorous study. They actually found benefits in the Parkinson's symptoms, so a reduction in the stiffness and the slowness that we see. And they saw improvements in balance and walking and freezing and quality of life, right? And we also think this is really good to stimulate cognition, thinking, right? Because you're learning new moves and new steps, right? So that's another possible benefit. And this is a fun way to work on improving balance. So there was an important study that just came out in the last couple of years here in Australia. And this was a study done on 230 people with Parkinson's disease. And they participated in a balance program, okay, for over a 6-month period of time. And they did about 45 to 60 minutes of exercise 3 times a week. Most of it was done at home, strengthening exercises, strategies to reduce freezing, balance training, okay? And then they had a once-a-month class with a physical therapist. So what I want to point out in this study is that the subgroup analysis that they did, they actually found the biggest effect on people earlier in the disease process who had less severe Parkinson's disease. So what we often think is that, well, people with Parkinson's tend not to get rehabilitation or physical therapy for falling until late in the game, right? Until injuries start to happen and falling is happening a lot. And physical therapy can help people at that point. But what this study is showing is the benefits of an exercise program in reducing frequency of falls early in the process. So this data is very important because it tells us that we need to be addressing the balance problems as early as possible. I would argue even before there's a fall. We want to take a preventative approach, right? We want to improve balance to reduce the risk of falling and to reduce the frequency of falling over time. This was another study done in Australia with over 200 people with Parkinson's disease. And what they found is here a significant reduction in falls in both the strength training and what we call the movement strategy training. Movement strategy training are sort of strategies to walk better and to stand up from a chair better and to get in and out of bed better. And both of those were effective at reducing falls, suggesting that balance is a modifiable component. This is something we want to target early. I just put this slide here because to show you that balance in Parkinson's, and in everybody, but particular Parkinson's, is not an easy thing. It's not a simple concept. There are many parts of balance, many aspects of balance. And it's important to see a physical therapist if you're falling or experiencing problems with balance or stumbling, or even if you're not. Right? And just anticipating that. There's so many different parts to balance that a physical therapist can help figure out what is the nature of the balance problem in each individual person. And that helps us figure out, well, what's the best exercise program given that particular profile? All right? And so what I want to say overall is that no matter what the kind of exercise is, no matter whether it's aerobic training or strengthening or balance training, it has to be challenging. It has to be just beyond your current capabilities. This data in both animal studies and in human studies show that the intensity, the specificity, the difficulty, and the complexity of the exercise matters. Okay, so you can't, basically what it means is you can't just go through the motions, right? You have to work at it a little bit and push a little bit outside your comfort zone. And then the other big concept that we want to talk about is sometimes I give people an exercise program and they say, well, all right, this is great, I'm going to do this, but how long do I have to do it for? Uh-oh. Yeah. How about forever, right? How about forever? And that's true whether you have Parkinson's disease or not, right? This is not a short-term fix. This is a lifestyle change, right? This is something that is important to integrate into your everyday life. Just in case you're not convinced, right? This is a study that we did years ago, and here was a group of people who participated in an exercise program for 6 weeks. And at the end of 6 weeks, we saw a significant increase in walking speed. And then here was the green group here, and they didn't participate in the exercise program during this time. Then it was their turn. And then they participated in the exercise program, and they saw an increase in walking speed. And then what happened? When both groups here were done with the training, they stopped doing it. They stopped doing it. And look what happened. We see that decline. We already know that there's about, when you stop exercising, the gains made, you lose approximately 50% of the gains in 4 to 12 weeks, right? So how many of you have experienced in your lifetime, that New Year's resolution and going to the gym in January, and then in February is starting to peter off, and then in March through December, there's no gym, right? And so you spend all this time getting all those great gains in January and February, and by the end of April, you lost, you don't want that, right? So we have to figure out what to do about that. In general, people with Parkinson's disease tend to be more sedentary than older adults of the same age without Parkinson's disease, actually about a third less active. And that's something that's generally modifiable. That's something we want to do something about. In some of our work, we actually studied people with Parkinson's disease over 1 year. We had them wear a monitor, an activity monitor on their ankle so that we could see how active they were over a week at the beginning and a week 1 year later. And what we saw in this study is a 12% reduction in the amount of walking, in the number of steps that people with Parkinson's disease took over 1 year. And what's really important about this study is that the medications for Parkinson's went up, right, during that time. And the disease severity stayed the same. So this test that you do with the neurologist, the rigidity and the bradykinesia, that all stayed the same. So what that suggests is that even when the disease was managed well and the disease wasn't progressing and people were holding their ground, they still became a lot less active despite that. And we saw a 40% reduction in the amount of moderate intensity steps, which are fast steps, basically. So not only did we see less steps, but we saw a big slowing of walking. And so we also followed people for a 2-year period. And what we found here is that walking was one of the things that progressed more quickly than some of the other features of Parkinson's disease. And walking, it turns out, is one of those things where some aspects of walking are helped with the medicine and some aspects of walking are not helped as much by the medicine. So the actual having walking as a part of the exercise program is really important, right? Because the medicines aren't doing everything that's needed to address the walking problem. So what we do is we think that the practice of tasks like walking is actually really important. So you may notice that walking should be automatic, right? Before Parkinson's, right, you just walked, it was automatic, and you didn't think about it. With Parkinson's disease, you may notice that, once I stop thinking about walking, it becomes more shuffling and smaller steps. But how many notice that when you think about it, you can actually improve it, right? But that's probably for a short time. Because who can go around thinking about walking all day long, right? That's a really hard thing to do. So this happens because without that dopamine, we lose that automaticity of movement. So movements are not automatic anymore. It requires sort of effort and thinking to make the movements better. So sometimes what we can do is when we practice walking, we can use other strategies like because that internal automaticity is missing, or that internal signal that drives walking is missing, let's come at it externally. What if there was an external cueing or an external barometer that you could use to help the quality of walking? One of the things that can be really important, and one of the things you can take advantage of, is using music to help work on your walking, to help improve your walking. And so what you can do is count. How many steps per minute are you taking right now? You can count that. Now, I would highly recommend that you do this with a physical therapist, because a physical therapist can closely evaluate you, try the different cadences, and determine which one is best for you. Because, for example, people who freeze don't want a faster cadence, okay? We might take someone who freezes actually and have a lower cadence to try to get longer, bigger steps to reduce the risk of freezing, for example, okay? Okay, so what do we know about the long-term benefits of exercise? Well, there was a study done in the Netherlands with 600 people with Parkinson's disease, and there were two groups of people. There were about 300 people that got physical therapy and 300 people that got physical therapy plus coaching, okay, plus some behavioral change things, some coaching to help increase physical activity. And so what I want to show you is what they found when they used an activity monitor to measure changes, is that the people who got the coaching were able to increase their physical activity level by 12% over 2 years. Right? I showed you the data that when we just observed people with Parkinson's disease and we didn't give them any treatment, right? They had a 12% reduction in the number of steps they took over 1 year. And this is showing an increase in physical activity over 2 years. So this is very possible, right? This is very possible for people with Parkinson's disease. Okay, this was a study done in over 2,000 people with Parkinson's disease, and they were given some questionnaires, and they were asked about their exercise. They were asked how much they exercised and what kind of exercise they did. And those people were categorized into one of two groups. Those people who participated in regular exercise at least 150 minutes a week, or 30 minutes 5 days a week, or those people with Parkinson's who didn't exercise, or exercised a lot less than that. And what they found here in this study is, that those people who with Parkinson's who exercised at least 150 minutes a week, 1 year later, okay, they had better quality of life, mobility, physical function, cognition, and less disease progression. Okay? So exercise needs to be part of the regular treatment of Parkinson's, right? Okay, so what prevents people from exercising? All right, everybody here knows it's good for you. I know, I can tell if you're not doing it, you want to be doing it, right? And so what's the problem? Right, it's hard, right? It's hard, it takes time. So tell me, what's the problem? What are some of the barriers? What are the things that make it difficult? Apathy. Okay, apathy, a lack of motivation. That can be particularly problematic in people with Parkinson's. Joint pain, and that's something we can treat, right? That's something we can do something about. I'm going to talk a little bit, I'm going to bring that up again. Okay, what else gets in the way? Say it again. Lazy. All right, got better things to do. Falling, fear of falling. Yeah, falling. Falling is a big one. So we did a study and we looked at, in 266 people, what were some of the things that got in the way of exercising. And one of the things that actually came out here, they're really important things. One of them was outcome expectation. You know what that means? Is that some people with Parkinson's disease weren't sure it was worth it. They said, I don't know. If I put all that time and effort into exercise, is it really going to make a difference? Well, I hope that all the data I shared with you today convinces you that it does make a difference. It absolutely does make a difference. And a lot of what I heard from people, and what I know from working with people, is when their doctor tells them that the exercise is important, they were more likely to be doing the exercise. So if your doctor doesn't bring it up, you should ask them about it. You should say, what do you think about exercise for the treatment of Parkinson's? You know what they're going to say? Oh, yeah. Right? Hopefully, right? They're going to say, yes, that's an important part. The other big thing that we found was something called, people that weren't exercising had something we call low self-efficacy, or sort of low confidence in their ability to exercise well and to do what they were supposed to do. People were struggling with, I don't know what to do. I'm not sure I can do it successfully. I don't know exactly how to progress the program. And that led to people just saying, well, forget it, right? But these things are modifiable. These are the things we can help you with. So this is the big thing. Unfortunately, in our healthcare system, people typically get diagnosed with Parkinson's. People with Parkinson's have symptoms for a long time, typically, before they're even diagnosed. And then they start taking medicines either right away or a couple of years later. And unfortunately, many people with Parkinson's don't see a physical therapist at all, or don't see a physical therapist until later, until there's like overt disability. And we're trying to change that model. In our center, we see people with Parkinson's disease at the very beginning when they're first diagnosed. And we do a whole battery of tests to specifically look at walking and balance and some of the really important aspects of Parkinson's that the doctor doesn't have time to go into that kind of detail during their office visit. Right? And so we do a whole battery of tests, and then we give people an exercise program. And we give people an exercise program that's individualized to them, depending on the results that we saw in our testing. And then we have people come back every 6 months over the course of the disease. Every 6 months. People go to see their neurologist every 6 months for a medication adjustment. People should go to their physical therapist every 6 months or so for an exercise adjustment, right? The exercise needs to be tailored, individualized, adapted, depending on the changes that you're experiencing over time. And so one of the things that we're doing, we know that people struggle with trying to stay active and trying to exercise. We did a pilot study looking at using mobile health technology. What if you came into the clinic to see your physical therapist? What if they set you up on an exercise program where they've videoed you doing all the exercises you should be doing, and then sent you home with an app on your phone or your computer or your iPad or wherever you could access this, right? And you go home, and when you go home, you open up the app and you see yourself exercising. You can play those videos. So for example, I could send you home with this, and you would open the app and you would see yourself exercising because we videoed you. And you hit play, and you're going to hear the physical therapist. And it tells you how many to do, and it even has notes under there in case you have to think about something specific. You hit, I did it. And then you put in how many you did, and we ask you, was it easy or was it difficult? Was it painful or was it painless? And we can see, and you can even chat to us. You can send us a message. You can say, oh, I have a question about my knee hurts with this exercise, right? And then you can see your progress over time. There are graphs where you can see your progress. And then what we see, we open our app and we see all the people we're following. And we can say, uh-oh, let's check out Mr. Jones. Let's see what he's been doing. He sent me a message. Oh, he has a question about this exercise. His knee hurts. You know what we can do? We can change the exercise remotely. We can change the exercise remotely if something hurts, or we can make it, if the exercises are getting easier and easier and easier over time, we can take away an exercise and upload a new one, right, without having you come in. And we do this over 6 months, and then we have you come back in and we do all those tests again for walking and balance to see what the benefits are and to see what has to be changed. And so one of the things we learned from this study is that in the first 3 months, if we could get people on the exercise program and making it a habit and integrating it into their lives in the first 3 months, they were good for the year. Right? So it's that beginning part of really making it part of your life. And so we're just winding up here. This is a slide that just shows some national guidelines about how much exercise to do. But this is a gentleman who, with Parkinson's disease, just an example. We put him on an exercise program, and he comes in every year. I just showed you the annual data. And all you have to do, without even knowing what these numbers mean, is that they're pretty stable over the course. The walking and balance is pretty stable over the course of 4 to 5 years. So we can reduce disability, optimize function, optimize quality of life, okay? But I would highly recommend that you seek out a physical therapist if you haven't seen one already. It is important, just like when you go to a doctor, that you find a doctor with expertise in Parkinson's disease, a movement disorder specialist. Physical therapists also specialize. It is important to find a physical therapist who specializes in Parkinson's disease. There are even physical therapists who are board certified in neurology. So you could ask when you make an appointment, do you have a physical therapist that's board certified in neurology? Because they're more likely to have expertise in Parkinson's. If you want help finding a physical therapist in your area that has this expertise, we have, with funding from the APDA, we have a national exercise helpline, a toll-free phone number, and an email, rehab@bu.edu, where you can contact us, and we have a database of physical therapists, and we can try to find somebody in your local community so you can get the exercise program that you need. Okay, thank you. I think we're going to take questions at this point.